Good evening. I will now call to order the Chesterfield Township Planning Commission meeting on October 17th, 2023. I will call the roll. Mr. Miller is here. Mr. LaBelle?
Here.
Mr. Demink?
Here.
Mr. Leonard?
Here.
Mr. Renault?
Here.
Mr. Jaworski?
Here.
Mr. Klonowski?
Here.
Mr. Carr?
Here.
Mr. Brokart?
Here.
All are present. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Approval of the minutes of prior meetings. I will make a motion to approve the minutes of September 19th, 2023.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Miller, supported by Mr. Renault. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Approval of the agenda. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Miller, supported by Mr. Renault. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Public hearings, we have one public hearing tonight. Rezoning number 369, requesting to rezone property located on the south of Cotton Road between Gratiot and I-94 from C3 General Commercial to RM2 Residential Multifamily, parcel ID number 15-09-20-13-008. Make a motion to open the public hearing.
Motion to open public hearing.
We have a motion by Mr. Miller, supported by Mr. Demink. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Ms. Osborne?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So tonight, as you mentioned, we have a rezoning in front of us. The Planning Commission is tasked with making a recommendation to the Township Board as to whether or not to approve this rezoning. So in your packet is our review letter. You can see on page 1 there's a map of the site. The surrounding properties are, and the property itself is currently C3 General Commercial, and the properties to the south are single-family residential. And the applicant is seeking to rezone to RM2 Residential Multiple Family. The site's 2.45 acres, and again, the surrounding uses are commercial uses. To the north and east are current commercial businesses that are in use. To the west, it's a vacant building with a large vacant rear yard. And then again, to the south are single-family homes. So the rest of the letter goes through the considerations for a rezoning. And at the bottom of page 2, it talks about consistency with the master plan. So the master plan has designated this specific this area as community-wide commercial, which aligns with the current zoning of C3. And again, everything surrounding it to the east, north, and west is also community-wide commercial, and to the south is blended density residential uses according to the master plan. The site has the infrastructure required to be either C3 or RM2 with water and sewer. It's on an already improved road on Cotton there, and then Gratiot's not far away. And there's no surface water on the site. The applicant has not provided any evidence that the property cannot be developed or used as zoned. Moving on to criteria 4 at the bottom of page 3, talks about compatibility with the surrounding land uses. RM2 is not necessarily compatible with the uses along Cotton Road and the existing single-family residences to the south. However, it could be a good buffer transition zone between the commercial uses to the north, east, and west, and the residential uses on the south. The main incompatibility really is with the single-family residential homes, which are less intense than what could be permitted in the RM2 district. In the uses in the RM2 district, the permitted uses include 2-family dwellings, apartments, multiplexes, townhomes, tourist homes, lodging house, and boarding homes. There are some additional special land uses as well in that for that district. In terms of the burden on the thoroughfares, Cotton Road and Gratiot are planned and classified as roads that would be able to handle an increase in traffic, but a full traffic study would be needed to determine the impact of that a change like this might have on the site and on the surrounding roads. Item 6 at the top of page 4 asks if there's other land currently available for this use. There are other parcels that are RM2 throughout the township that are already developed, or most are already developed. There's some in the north part of the township that are undeveloped that are already zoned RM2. The current site appears like it would be able to meet the requirements for development for the RM2 zoning. It meets the required minimum lot size and lot width. We'll need to see a site plan, of course, to confirm what, if this were to move forward with the development, that that the standards are met. The current request of a rezoning is the best way to handle this situation, moving from a different use from commercial to residential. So this is the right venue and process for that. And finally, the site has not had any development proposals since the master plan was adopted in 2021. And then there's questions for consideration regarding spot zoning. And there's 3 questions for the Planning Commission to consider with that. The first is whether or not it's consistent with the master plan, which we discussed. The request isn't consistent with the future land use map for the site, but the future land use map is not parcel specific. And then the next question, excuse me, is if the proposed zoning district is a logical extension of an existing zoning district in the area. And if this request were to be granted, this would be the only RM2 zone parcel in the area. But again, you could think about it as the potential to be a buffer or transition zone. And then third, would approving the request grant a special benefit to the property owner, and that would be for the Planning Commission to consider. So I'm happy to answer questions if the commission has any.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant here who would like to address the board? Come up to the podium. Wait, the applicant. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Giovanni Morrow. I'm with Morrow Engineering on behalf of the applicant. Submitted for a rezoning, as you guys heard. And the biggest is that C3 next to a single family residential, it being a transition into the C3 zoning. The biggest concern would be the residences to the south and just transitioning that for under C3 zonings. You can have fast food deliveries, commercial properties, obviously, hotels, motels, everything that's in the permitted use, as you guys know. So the biggest thing to focus on would be just the transition of that. You have single family, you have residential, multifamily in between the commercial use. The general commercial around there can also value the use of multiple family as well, being in the area. That's primarily it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So now we'll let the audience participate with any questions. You have 3 minutes to state what you have on your mind. Please sign in, state your name for the record.
My name is Mark Wampler. I live at 50085 Dove Lane. My property directly is connected or backs up to that lot. I had, previous to this, taken care of about 40 feet beyond that lot line for the last 20 years, which nobody bothered to ever maintain the property at any point during that time, until recently they came in and decided to clear cut all the trees that I had been maintaining as a sound and sight buffer for the looking across the field at AT&T. The other thing that is having a multifamily structure in that area is going to compound the traffic problems we already have on Cotton. It said, according to your notes, that it could handle it. I'm not sure I understand how, because ever since Marketplace went in, our traffic on Cotton Road has gotten nightmarish. There are days you cannot leave out of Eagles Nest Sub turning in either direction for a long period of time, waiting for traffic that's backed up at the light at Gratiot or backed up at the light at I think it's Carlos and Market. I have no understanding of what they want to put in that spot and what they're going to do to give us what we're going to be looking at. I don't know if there's a barrier wall that is going to be required or what's going to happen. Nobody's bothered to inform us of what they suggested, and so I personally oppose it. Thank you.
Next.
Good evening. My name is Janice Young. I live on Yorkshire. I drive down that road every day for work, so it will directly impact my commute to work. I just want to say that it seems like there's been a run on multifamily in Chesterfield lately. We have tons of apartments going in. I don't know what's going to happen with the traffic flow on the roads. I don't know how we could handle much more. Cotton Road gets really backed up. People, try to divert the 23 and Gratiot intersection. I myself do that. They come down Gratiot to Cotton, to Donner, to 23. That's directly in front of this property. I mean, there's already significant traffic there. I just want to touch on a couple of things from Giffords and Webster's. It's not consistent with our master plan. There's no need for the township to have this property rezoned. We have other available RM2 zones out there. And it won't be compatible with the surrounding uses. We already know that, with the single-family people that are there. I don't know how having an apartment building in their backyard would improve their values. I'm sure it would have a negative impact. As far as having a burden on the nearby thoroughfares, I already mentioned the traffic. A traffic study needs to be done on Cotton Road. I don't know if one's ever been done or the last time it's been done, but the traffic is heavy there. And as we all know, that the intersection at Cotton and Sugarbush is already a nightmare. In fact, just recently, like a week ago, 7.5 minutes to get from Sugarbush on to make a left onto Cotton. That's really not acceptable in a residential area. I also want to remind the commission that just recently we had a resident killed on Cotton Road walking home from work. That's not a pedestrian-friendly area, and I'm not sure what amenities they would offer to people to live there. It's a nice place to live, but just don't take your dog for a walk because you got nowhere to go. It's not really meant for that. And this does look like a spot zone that would benefit the developer only. So I'm not in supporting of that, especially without a site plan. They came here tonight and they didn't really tell us what they plan to do with the site. Is it going to be ranch style, 2-story, 3-story? I mean, I didn't hear if they said anything, but anyway, I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. If you want to step up and sign in before you speak,
Yep, my name
leave-
is Cheryl
leave it on the
Story.
table.
Pardon me?
No, go ahead.
Okay, My name is Cheryl Surrey. I live at 50061 Dove Lane, so they're going to be in my backyard. I reside there right now. The other thing is, okay, we talked about the traffic, which is horrendous. What about the water pressure? The water pressure is really bad. So how is that going to affect us in the housing with multifamily? So, I mean, we've talked about everything else, the traffic, so I'm not going to waste your time. But the water pressure, and I totally oppose this.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next.
I'm John Jazorski. I recently purchased a house right on Dove Lane. I live at 48749 Wheatfield right now, right in Chesterfield. You know, I like my nights being quiet, peaceful. That was one of the selling points when I bought this house in the last month, and to have it rezoned to who knows what with how many people living there. I mean, I kind of oppose it. That's not what I signed up for. I was familiar with the master plan. I knew, okay, commercial, you know, they're going to shut down during their normal business hours. The nights are going to be peaceful. I didn't sign up for all the extra congestion on Cotton. I didn't sign up for all this traffic that would be imposed, you know, coming home from work, going to work. If there's a lot of extra people living there, there's going to be a lot of extra traffic to and from work during, you know, normal commuting times. If it was commercial, that's out of normal commuting times. That's when people are off of work. But, you know, again, like other people have mentioned, I don't think that road can support that much traffic. You know, there's already condos, I don't know what the street is, but there's the street going, you know, right on the south side of Waterside and all that. There's condos or apartments there. There's a lot of congestion because of that. And, you know, I'm aligned with, I don't think the roads can support that kind of extra traffic from a multifamily infrastructure there. So I oppose it as a landowner that's backed up right to it, and a current landowner that's, you know, 6-7 blocks away. Like, that's not what I signed up for when I bought this house, and I think it's going to negatively impact my house value, and, you know, don't support it.
Thank you.
My name is Ron Surrey. I live on 50061 Dove Lane. Again, this directly impacts me. First of all, I can't understand how you want to build something in such a small area. You guys are building subdivisions all the way up and down 23 Mile Road. You have a ton of land over by Cabela's. I don't know why you're not utilizing that or what's going on with that. You have 2.4 acres you're going to try and build apartments in. Where's the traffic going to go? You can't use Gratiot. Gratiot's blocked off. You cannot use Gratiot. You're going to have to use Dove Lane. Again, it's going to affect everybody in here in this subdivision with the water pressure and the traffic. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Josh Babbitt. I live at 50049 Dove Lane, just behind the rezone area here. One of my big concerns that was touched on earlier would be pedestrian traffic there. So we don't have any sidewalks on the south side of Cotton Road that run from the AT&T building to that first traffic light. So if we're going to put a whole new residential building or area in there, all that's going to have to be redone, sidewalks, everything like that. So one of my big concerns is going to be infrastructure on how that's going to happen. I have property behind me that's owned by AT&T that they don't really maintain. I maintain that property, and the same kind of has gone for this property for a long time. So it would be interesting just to see what is going to go back there and how they're going to maintain that property and do it the right way, because traffic, infrastructure, and one other issue, our water pressure. We do have low water pressure, especially during the summer in that area. We have people in other neighborhoods that have pools, different things that, you know, fill up their pools, use water pressure for different things. It takes us a lot longer to do similar tasks. So I would just ask that we really take a hard look at it to see if it's the right thing for the area.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hello, my name is Stephen Ward. I live at 50037 Dove Lane. I also back up to the property in question that you're talking about building on. And I want to touch on one thing, because I mean, I agree with the traffic problem. It's obviously going to be a traffic problem right there. It's a bottleneck there already. I'm not going to go too deep into that because they already talked about that. One thing I was going to mention was, I thought Stephanie mentioned something about there's no problem with any water, any flooding there. There's a massive problem with flooding there on both ends of the subdivision. Going in off of Cotton Road, there's a massive problem with flooding there. Every time it rains, it floods really bad there. And also on the other end, where it goes into Carlos, it floods there too. So there is massive flooding going up and down Cotton Road, turning into our sub, which is the sub right behind where they're talking about building the multi-sectioned homes there. And like I said, we're not even sure what exactly going to go in there because we weren't informed. We just knew that it's going to go. They're trying to get it turned into residential from commercial. And I just wanted to touch on that. And I do oppose it because I don't think the roads can handle the traffic and the water is we got a lot of seeping problem, a lot of standing water when it rains bad. Floods both ends of the sub. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing nobody else, I'm going to bring it back up to the commission. I'm going to make a motion to close the public hearing. Support. We have a motion by Mr. Miller, supported by, who was that? Mr. Leonard, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Comments from the commission, Mr. Demink?
Okay, folks that are here, I'm having no idea what I'm doing on this yet, so probably not gonna make a decision, but I just want to let you know, reading from the permitted uses, what is allowed there right now, so you folks know under the current zoning. Professional office, medical office, local retail and service establishments, community and regional retail service establishments, clothing rental except industrial launders and linen supply, coin-operated service, machine operation, scale, shoe sign, membership organization, automotive dealers, hotels and motels, mortuaries, public utility buildings, which we already know because that AT&T building's been there since the very early 70s. I'm familiar with it. Accessory buildings, temporary buildings, garment pressing and agents for laundries and dry cleaners, coin-operated laundries and dry cleaning establishments, other laundry and garment services, miscellaneous personal services, rental of tools and household goods, appliance repair, museums and art galleries, automotive rental and leasing, dance studios, schools and halls, theatrical producers, physical fitness facilities, veterinary offices or clinics, and places of worship. So just to let you know, that's, under the current zoning, folks, that's what can go in there. So I'm just giving you a heads up of what can go in there now as it is. So, just so you know. Okay, folks? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brokart?
I don't have any comments.
Mr. Renault?
You actually have a few questions for the applicant. There's been a lot of assumptions from what I've heard this evening that people are just assuming you're planning on putting apartment buildings there. Would you care to enlighten us on what you're actually considering? Is that what you're looking to do, or give us some insight as to what you're potentially planning?
The intentional use is for multiple family, like townhome type styles, townhomes.
Okay.
Two-story max. Is that right? One-car garage.
So,
Livable space.
so
First
if you're
floor.
thinking two-story townhouses, based on that particular size of lot, you're looking at, maybe 24, 30 units in there, maybe, something like that?
If that, yeah.
If that.
17, I think, was the, again, like, no confirmed, site plan.
Right.
I think estimated, yeah, about 17.
Okay, no, that's what I was concerned with. Thank you.
Mr. Carr?
No, I really don't have any comments other than I'm personally not opposed to an R2. I think it is a decent transition to a C3. And I think development is all part of it. I mean, typically we try to, stay as close to our master plan as possible, but unfortunately that's why there are variances, right? So there are exceptions to certain rules. So I would not be opposed to this one, so I'm open to it.
Thank you. Mr. Jaworski?
Yeah, this one's going to take some thought because typically we have residents that are screaming for residential versus commercial. So I have heard the comments. The biggest thing is with traffic. I mean, can anybody point out an area in Chesterfield where traffic is not an issue? So, again, I would point you to the road commission for that, and then just enlighten the audience. If the applicant does receive this rezoning, they have to go through another phase of, what's going to go on the site. So we would have to review that. So this one's going to take some thought.
Thank you. Mr. Klonowski?
Yeah, same for me. It's master plan for C3. It could be looked at as a spot zoning, but the townhouses, that makes a transition possible. So it'll take some thought on this one. Thank you.
Mr. Leonard?
Yeah, as far as the traffic, I live near 21 in Jefferson, and I think a lot of the traffic, additional traffic that we're all experiencing everywhere, because I drive Cotton Road quite a bit too, is from all the construction and everybody taking whatever route they can. Because I've noticed that even on Jefferson, the traffic's backed up from 21 Mile all the way, almost all the way back to Selfridge and 21 Mile towards the I-94. So I think once the construction phase cleans up, I think the traffic will disperse and won't be as bad. I wanted to ask, the engineer said 17, was that 17 units or 17 buildings? Units. How many buildings are you thinking that you might end up? 3 buildings? All right, I agree with my other commissioners. It's going to take some thought. It's not a slam dunk, but some of it makes sense, and I understand all the other concerns. With the water pressure, that's something that the township would be able to help. With the flooding, same thing. Every property would have to maintain its own water, so it might actually improve the flood problems around there. So I'm not decided yet, but those are some of my thoughts. Thank you. And as far as the what it's zoned for now, I would hate to see a hotel or a motel plop up there. You never know what you have, so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. LaBelle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to remind all of us that we're only considering going from C3 to RM2, and that's all we know at this point. We're not considering, at least I'm not considering, what has been discussed here with what his thoughts are, is what he's going to put in here. I don't know. It would make a good transition, but it's going to take some time for me to think about this one, and it's not consistent with our master plan. It's not consistent with the future land use. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I live off of Cotton Road, so I drive it every day. And there is a lot of traffic on there right now. And I'm sure, like the other commissioner said, that it's because of all the traffic that's not on the freeway. It's all in our side streets. So I think that eventually that traffic won't be that bad. And I'm probably going to vote yes on this. Our normal procedure is to wait 2 weeks unless I get a motion by a fellow board member. So if I don't hear one, Mr. Palin?
Mr. Chairman, just to let the Planning Commission know and the public know, the next meeting falls on election day, the next scheduled meeting, so there won't be a Planning Commission meeting that day. It'll be the following scheduled meeting, which I think is November 21st.
November 21st. 4 weeks. Okay, thank you. That's it. We'll have that in November. Sure.
Excuse me, I just, in response to all the, didn't get to really address, as far as, you know, infrastructure goes, traffic, a lot of this, again, the RM2 presents like a softer transition into this commercial. If it ends up being commercial, I mean, we went through the permitted uses, hotels, motels, fast food joints, things of higher use. So as far as the residents go, having a multiple townhome type development, you'll be able, you can screen the property up against the single family homes. You'll have residents adjacent to other residents, more in a townhome type fashion. But you're not having that late night traffic as far as you know, the use goes and the constant. It's people living next to other people with single family homes. So I don't know if that helps in all the discussions, but to us, it seems like it's beneficial for the community, it's beneficial to the residences. Infrastructure-wise, less use on water supply. All the stormwater drainage gets contained on site. They'll restrict all that. They'll, you know, have a nice pond feature that also provides as a buffer. Landscape requirements, screening requirements too. So that's all.
Thank you. I know that property's been for sale for 26 years, and we finally got somebody that's gonna buy it and do something nice with it. I think it's good. No, you've already, he's the applicant. Public hearing is closed. Public hearing is closed. That's why we don't take no more discussion.
Only take opinions from the people that are paying for this application? We're the people that live here and pay taxes.
We all live here, we all pay taxes. I live on Cotton.
They're paying the application. Why don't they take the public notice? That's all I'm asking. This is my first public hearing. Why do they get to talk twice?
The public hearing is closed. That's the way it is. So, thank you.
Good to know you guys care about us. Public opinion matters.
Hey, you know what? I live in Brycewood Sub, which is right down the road from you, and I had to approve a subdivision right in my backyard too. Do you think my wife liked that? No, she didn't.
I grew up in Kingswood where they. We gotta stop this.
Okay. We're done. Item number 6, reviews. Our secretary will do the items that we can do in a timely manner. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item A is Ultimate Framing Company, LLC. Site plan is 2023-15. It's Zone C3. It's .78 acres, the east side of Gratiot between Carriageway Drive and 24 Mile Road. The parcel ID is 15-09-17-227-015. The address is 52650 Gratiot Avenue. I believe the applicant and his architect are here this evening. Personally, kind of a little confused at what's going on there, so if you could please just take a moment and kind of give us a presentation of what's going on.
Hi, everybody. My name's Robert Geck. I'm the owner at 52650 Gratiot. There's 3 buildings that reside on the property right now. One that up front, which looks similar to a house, probably at one time was a house. We run our construction office out of that place for Ultimate Framing. That's part of this application. We're asking, we bought the property, I think 2019, fixed up the interior. We want to clean up the exterior now. So the front, we'd like to put a little vestibule area on it and just kind of spruce it up. Right now it's a block structure. You know, we were thinking a drive it or maybe a half stone on the bottom. And it doesn't have to be anything in particular, just nicer than what it is. I think your requirements call for brick. I didn't see brick in this design looking well, but I'm not against it either. So that's the first part of it, is just a cleanup on the front of the office building. Now, in the back of the property is 2 kind of garage structures that have been existing there. The previous owner, I think, ran a heating and cooling company out of one of them. Well, when we moved in, we turned it into a gym, a boxing gym. And it's private use. It's my own family. We have a personal trainer in there, and he basically trains 4 of my kids and 2 of my brother's kids. And they're almost to a professional level. They're getting to the point, for example, this Sunday, leaving to Ireland with my 15-year-old to fight over there for a couple fights. They're very good at it, and we want to expand that area just for basically personal boxing. And so we're behind those 2 garage structures, just want to build basically like another garage structure. And something simple, but clean. It's kind of hidden from the roads, hidden from sight. And if, we're looking for just more space. If you have any questions, I can answer them.
Sure, thank you. So in your packets, you have a letter from Julia and I, our other colleague who helped me with this one. So as the applicant noted, there's a couple of components to this proposal. There's addition of the boxing gym of just over 2,000 square feet to the rear of the existing gym. There's an addition of a 400 square foot covered porch between the garage and the proposed gym, and then a 125 square foot covered porch on the existing front office with the facade updates that were mentioned. So on the bottom of page 1, there's quite a few items that I think the Planning Commission may wish to consider, and I'll highlight those as I move through the letter. There's some additional administrative site plan revisions that the staff and I can work with the applicant to clean up and make sure it's all square. In terms of dimensional standards, looking at page 3, all the setbacks and dimensional standards appear to be met, except for the parking setbacks. What's currently provided on the plans is measured from the lot line, not the road center line. So we just need to make sure that the parking setbacks are measured correctly and that the parking won't fall within that setback. Looking at the site standards beginning on page 4, the building surface, as the applicant mentioned, the materials that are proposed don't meet the zoning ordinance requirements. The building is existing, so the Planning Commission may wish to discuss if what's being proposed is acceptable. And it appears that the existing building is concrete with some vinyl siding, just to give you an idea here. Additionally, the Planning Commission may wish to discuss the open garage door that's on the rear of the building, and if it could be located to, and this is on the boxing gym, on the very back part of the project proposal here. Since that faces the residential area that's adjacent. So you may wish to to discuss the location of that.
Which-
The,
Which I don't mind removing. Doesn't have to be there.
okay, thank you. Continuing on page 4, site circulation access. This is something that we know the fire department is also concerned about. So how, there's the drive from Gratiot with the parking, but no real vehicle access back to the boxing gym. And so that would be one concern. The width from Gratiot is less than the 30-foot that's required. It's about 2 feet short, just a little less. So the Planning Commission may wish to consider if it needs to be widened to meet the standard. And then the ordinance requires reinforced concrete curbs, and those are not provided along the access drive or the parking. With regards to parking, the applicant has provided 9 parking spaces, including one barrier-free space, which is 3 more than what was there previously. The number of spaces, again, has been measured, or the location of the setback needs to be updated so that that's correct with the ordinance measurement requirements. Let's see, the applicant may wish to discuss with the Planning Commission if the number of spaces that you're providing is actually needed, especially if there's issues with the parking setback. The access drive meets the space requirements, the width requirements, as do the spaces, the parking spaces themselves. Bicycle parking has been added at the northeast corner of the parking lot. And it looks like there will be space for 2 bicycle parking spaces. We'll just need to see the details to make sure that the type of bicycle parking facilities meet the ordinance standards. We're on page 5 now, looking at pedestrian circulation and sidewalks. There's currently a sidewalk that runs along Gratiot. It's a little short of the 5-foot wide requirement for the township, and it doesn't connect all the way to the south end of the parcel. So the Planning Commission may wish to discuss if the sidewalk should be widened to meet that minimum, and the applicant should revise the plan so that the sidewalk connects all the way to the edge of the parcel. There's no unloading or unloading areas proposed, and so the Planning Commission may wish to discuss with the applicant if that's needed. In terms of screening, major screening is required between this site and the one-family residential uses along the rear lot line. The existing screening includes a 6-foot tall wood privacy fence and a proposed 10-foot wide landscape green belt. The types of screening that are permitted are listed in the letter at the bottom of page 5. And the closest that it comes to meeting this would be having a 6-foot tall decorative masonry wall, but instead they have the fence. So the Planning Commission can discuss if the fence is sufficient. In terms of landscaping in the parking areas, since there are 9 parking spaces, the applicant needs to provide 2 trees. 1 tree is proposed for the north parking area, opposite of where the parking spaces are. So it would be nice to see, or we suggest that the trees be moved to where the parking spaces are on the south end of the parking area. Frontage landscaping, all the requirements are met. The clear vision triangle shows that there's safety at the intersection and access drives. In terms of lighting, we have not seen a photometric plan yet, but that can be reviewed administratively. And then there is no detail provided about waste management on the site and trash receptacles. So that's something the Planning Commission may wish to discuss with the applicant. And that's all. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Is there any comments from the commission? Mr. Demink? No. Mr. Brokart?
Is this going to stay a private, family-owned operation, or do you have plans to grow it?
Absolutely not. It's going to stay just private, just family.
Just family?
Yeah. Boxing gyms are very hard to run as a profit. We have no intentions of doing that at all.
And would it be seen from the main road going out front?
I I've gone in every which direction, and I believe the two structures that are in front of it right now block it completely. So.
I have one more, I think. Hang on, give me just 1 second here. Do you have any pictures of what it's going to look like?
I do have a blueprint. I don't know if you have.
Did anyone see the blueprint? I haven't seen it.
Here, Rich.
So, do you
Oh,
have
you actually have the drawing. Beautiful. I'll take a look at the drawing, thank you.
Oh, we have that in the packet.
Yeah.
That's the front of the existing building.
Do you want me to explain it at all?
That's the front of the first building, right?
Yes, that's the front of the existing office right now. Yes, in the picture there, that's the front of the existing office building. And if you can see the glass foyer area and the covered porch to the right of that, that's the addition area. And then a new face on it.
I think it looks great. I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Renault?
My questions were just answered. Thank you.
Mr. Carr?
Yeah, I had a lot of questions, mostly because I was confused on what we were reviewing. To me, it was an incomplete package, and I didn't understand what in particular we were being asked to review. I see a C3, right, which comes with a lot of, again, once they go to renovate the C3, they need to bring it up to the current ordinance requirements. And the documents that we had received, to me, were insufficient to make any determination of exactly what we were reviewing. So to me, it was an incomplete package, which means I don't have all the facts to actually review and provide feedback on. In particular, like that second sheet they have, it's just the front building where they want to expand that little entryway, but yet the main expansion, the second part, there's no drawings or anything to it that was in our package. So I didn't quite understand that whole thing. And then to me, the site itself, again, either they're coming up to the current ordinance requirements when it comes to landscaping, standoffs, parking, things of that nature, or they're not. So again, for me, I was very unclear on what exactly am I being asked to review and to what extent, because to me, it was an incomplete package that I could not do my job with. So, so that's literally what I was gonna say today, because if you want me to review it, I can review it, but to me, they've gotta provide a full site plan review approval that should be reviewed by Giffords. To me, again, what we got here is only a piece of the puzzle. So that's my comment.
Thank you.
I apologize. I did send in that plan with it. Somehow it must not have gotten into the package. So.
Mr. Jaworski?
Yeah, I know, it looks like, actually a really cool facility, and just the simple fact that I heard it's gonna be private is, it's good with the community, but like Brian pointed out, seems like there's a lot of open things that really need to be addressed, and just made sure that it's clear before we approve anything moving forward. Something you probably can go back and take care of, and I too agree, we really didn't know what we were approving tonight, so.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Klinowski?
Yeah, I would like to see those sidewalks extended, some screening in the back along the residential. Yeah, I'm a little concerned about the fire access to the rear of the building. That's a concern too. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard?
Yeah, I see some positives about this, but there are some missing there's some missing items here, like sidewalks, and so I think filling in some of the gaps of some of the questions from Giffords would be advantageous. I'm leaning towards making this work, but I think it's just a little soon yet. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. LaBelle?
I agree with everybody else. I think it's a great idea. Congratulations.
Thank you.
But there are quite a few, there's quite a few things need to be addressed. What I would propose to you this evening is you know, think about if you want to spend this money, because a lot of things that have to be addressed are going to be pretty costly, even though we don't consider that, but for your own, as a neighbor, please consider that.
I understand.
And, you know, I would like to postpone making a decision this evening and give you an opportunity to update the drawings so that we have something that we can look at. Please consider everything that has been mentioned, you know, for instance, you know, access to the building. What concerns me is your children's well-being. If an ambulance needs to get in there, I want to make sure that they can get in there.
Sure.
You know, things of that nature. I'm not saying
Completely
that
understand.
that you haven't done that, but, you know, please consider that.
Yes, sir.
And if you're okay with that, I would like to consider that after Mr. Miller speaks.
No, go ahead.
Is the 4 weeks enough? I mean, I can postpone making a decision up to 6 meetings if you'd like.
I think 4 weeks should be fine.
Okay.
Definitely.
With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to postpone making a decision up to 6 meetings for Ultimate Framing Company LLC. The site plan is 2023-15.
We have a motion by Mr. LaBelle, supported by Mr. Miller. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item B is sign review J23-1961, Dirty Dough. The address is 50944 Gratiot Avenue. They're requesting variances for 2 wall signs. The applicant is here this evening. I had the opportunity to speak with him before the meeting, and he has some proposals for us, and he wants to discuss and come to some kind of resolution this evening. He does have other options, and that's what's great about this guy. He always comes to the table with different options so that we have an opportunity to discuss them.
Good evening, I'm Brian Duque with Signorama, 36886 Harper Avenue in Clinton Township, Michigan. So this particular property is a little bit unique. I went on Google actually just before the meeting, and they end up being in this little corner spot here right next to the Verizon location. And I don't know if that shows up in your photograph or not, but the Verizon location, this facade sticks out about a good 3 feet out in front of the corner he's going to be in, making it very difficult to see if you're headed southbound on Gratiot. So make them a little bit tough to see in that corner. I looked up to find out what his frontage was, and he's technically written up for 16 foot of frontage. My staff's been trained to measure from wall to wall. Obviously, when this was designed, it was meant to be a wider unit, but as you can see, Verizon is impeded. We have the wall and the windows. So he's actually measuring 16 feet for his interior space. Was actually designed to be a little wider. You guys see that from here? It's a little bit distance. So what he's asking for, the other part that's unique is if you look at his logo, the actual sign or text area of the sign is quite a bit smaller. It's got a lot of decorative space on the sign, which is also eating up some of his square footage. So he's asking for a little bit larger sign and make it more visible, obviously with it being in that corner, give him better visibility.
Okay, that's great. You know, it is big, the back of the building. You also have a pretty large sign in the back of the building.
Yeah, the back of the building, he's at 24 square foot. You and I talked about that prior to the meeting. Really, the only visibility of that is to the mall. From manufacturing standpoint, we're looking to do these as channel letters, individual letters on a backer, not a capsule. And we kind of run into constraints in terms of how small you can make a capsule and still get lighting into it. I think the ordinance is 15 square foot. This is currently drawn at 24. If we could end up in the middle, that would make the manufacturing process a lot better and allow us to properly light it instead of having to make this as a big can or box sign, you call it. So we could kind of work with this one a little bit, a lot easier.
So how small can it be and still make it work?
Right now, at the 16, the letters are like under 7 inches on the lowercase. If we can get to around 20, it's gonna put us pretty close at minimum 8 inches we like to stay within on a channel letter and what the equipment can physically bend and still have it workable. You start getting those little letters, it gets pretty tough to fabricate.
Okay.
Okay, you all set? Any questions from the commission? Mr. Demay, Mr. Rope?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I may, I just want to bring up real quick that I put in front of each of you tonight because we have a couple of these in front of us, variances from the sign ordinance. I did put the appeals and variance section of the ordinance in front of you, which does state that the planning commission may vary dimensional provisions of this chapter upon a finding of all of the following. There's 5 items listed there. So when the planning commission is making their determination, they need to weigh those 5 criteria. And if a variance is going to be granted, it needs to be, they need to find affirmatively for all 5 of those items, and any motion should include that in the record.
Go ahead, Rick, make a motion.
So currently, Mr. Palin, our ordinance is 24 square feet. You want to review the ordinance with everybody just real quick?
Yeah, so the current ordinance allows for 1 square foot per linear foot of unit frontage, or 24 square feet, whichever is greater. And that's up to 3 signs would be allowed within that total of 24 square feet. And then one of the signs has to be 50% of the total allowable area. Essentially, that grants you a main sign, and then would be 2 accessory signs to that. But yes, for this unit, measuring at 16 feet, it would be a total of 24 square feet.
Mr. Renaud?
Quick question for you, Jonathan. The previous sign that was there for the previous occupant, I believe it was at 21.8 square feet for that frontage. So if they've kept it at that size, then they actually don't need to be in front of us, from what I understand. Is that correct?
Correct. That is correct. The previous sign did receive a variance from the planning commission, but that was prior to our current ordinance. There wasn't the or 24 square feet, whichever is greater provision. It was just 1-to-1. And they were only allowed 1 sign per street frontage. So now we've expanded that and allowed for multiple signs per unit. So yeah, they previously were approved for 21.8 on the front and 15 square feet in the rear.
And Mr. Palin, how many of those buildings on that received a variance on that strip mall?
I unfortunately don't have the exact number. I know that there's several. Maybe even willing to say the majority have received variances from the planning commission. There's been consideration to the speed limit and the building being on an angle, which is, several have been in front of you before.
Thank you.
Yeah, the door, that sign in the back, is that door, is that for the public access, or is that for loading and?
No, that's not a public door. That's just that plaza does advertising in the back because there's so many patrons at the other mall behind it. That's just employee door, emergency door.
Because it would seem that the back would be a lesser
Correct.
impact with regard to the sign than in the front, so.
Correct. It's just a viewing distance to the other plaza.
Yeah, my thinking is maybe the back one could be a little smaller and still,
Right.
Utilize the front a little larger, so just my thoughts on it.
Thank you. Anybody else? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I have one more question.
Okay.
Is there an opportunity here? as Mr. Palin had stated, the existing variance on that building is, they had 21 square feet in the front of the building, and they had 15 square feet in the back of the building. With reviewing your drawings, you have a drawing for a 24 square foot sign and a 16-foot square sign. Is that a possibility? And, I also have to remind everybody, the way that our ordinance is written, it's a square box. These are round signs, even though we can't consider that, it's really not as obtrusive as it seems. In any event, is there a possibility that the applicant or the owner would go for the 24 feet in the front and 16 feet in the back?
Yeah,
Based
actually,
upon our existing variance.
the second drawing I did was actually 26 square foot, which still was pretty decent visibility. And again, I just want to remind you, the actual sign area around the text, the actual advertising area is much smaller. We're squeezing a lot of letters into a small space, but his logo and his design obviously takes up a lot of square footage, a lot of real estate, as we call it.
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, personally, from the size of the other signs that are adjacent to this, I personally do not, I think it'll fit in aesthetically quite well. I mean, I don't see an issue. I think when you look at whether it's 24 or 26 square feet on the front, if you look at the size of the signs of the other businesses there, to me, it's aesthetically gonna fit in there nicely. It's not gonna be huge and gaudy. That's just my opinion. I personally don't have an issue with the 24-ish in the front and 12 to 16 in the back, whatever, To me, it'll fit well.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Guys, good. So, are we in agreement then that you can do it in 26 square feet and 16 square feet?
16's a little bit tight. If we can squeeze it up a little bit, that would be helpful. The stroke of the letter is only an inch, like and a quarter on that 16. We'd like to try to get to an inch and a half, inch and 3/4, so lighting fits in it properly.
Yeah, I understand that, but this is the back of the building. It's, it's not a Gratiot, it's not a 23-mile road. It just, it's
Right.
marking the back of the building. Personally, I'm not as concerned about it as it would seem. If you think you can do it in 16 square feet, I'll make the motion.
Okay, well, then we'll have to do that.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve, as outlined in section 52-11, and I apologize, this is going to take a while. Item 1 is, there are special circumstances or conditions such as existence of buildings topographically, vegetation, sign structures, lot dimensions, and other matters on the lot or adjacent lots or within the adjacent right-of-way which substantially restrict the effectiveness of the sign in question. Provided, however, that such special circumstances or conditions must be particular to the particular business or enterprise or lot to which applicant desires to draw attention, and do not apply generally to other businesses or enterprises. Any variances shall be granted only on the extent of the rendering equity of the rights granted by this chapter and others. So as far as item A, this is all part of my motion. As far as item A, I feel that the way that building is oriented on 23 Mile Road in Gratiot, it does meet that as a variance. Strict enforcement, item number 2 is strict enforcement of provisions of this chapter would serve no useful purpose. Again, as part of my motion, again, the way that the building is situated and strict enforcement of this does not serve as any purposes. The type of sign structure, item number 3 is the type of sign structure and location proposed would not pose any significant risks to the public health, safety, or welfare. It does not. Item number 4, the benefit of the sign to the general public and/or applicant under the circumstances outweighs the risk of any traffic safety and the township's desire to eliminate the accumulation of visual clutter in accordance with the stated purpose of this chapter. And I do agree with that. It does benefit the applicant It does benefit the general public. And item 5 is a variance would be in the interest of the township and not against the spirit and intent of this chapter. I do believe that this variance would be in the interest of the township. We all know what we had there before, and the way that this building is laid out, the parking lot, the speeds on 23 Mile Road, speeds on Gratiot, I think it does fit the bill. In any event, with all of that as part of my motion, I'd like to make a motion to approve.
We have a motion by Mr. LaBelle, supported by Mr. Miller. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
So just to clarify, we're doing how many square foot in the front, how many in the back?
I'm sorry, I should have included that in my motion as well. The last thing I'd like to include in my motion is that, as you offered, the front sign will be at 26 square feet.
Okay.
The sign in the back of the building will be at 16 square feet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For the clarification. Have a great evening.
The last item this evening is sign review, it's item C, is sign review J232158. The address is, or their address is 222020 Outdoor Media LLC, and erect an outdoor advertising sign located on the parcel ID number of 15-09-31-351-025. The applicant is here this evening. There are a number of variances that the applicant is asking, and please ask everybody to be patient.
Should we have Stephanie go first?
It was Jonathan.
Oh, yeah, Jonathan, you want to go first on the sign review?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I provided you all with a review that outlines the requirements of the sign ordinance and what is being requested of the applicant. To go through it briefly, there's 11 criteria for the outdoor advertising signs ordinance, which you'll probably hear me several times refer to a billboard, but it is the outdoor advertising sign section of the ordinance. Item 1 is outdoor advertising signs shall be located within 100 feet of the I-94 right-of-way. This particular sign does not. They're requesting a variance. It's approximately 900 feet or so away. That exact dimension was not provided, and it is located on township property. Item number 2 shall not be located within 1,500 feet of another such sign structure on the opposite side, or 5,000 feet on the same side, or nor 500 feet of an interchange. That criteria is met. The other part of that is not within 200 feet of a zoning district boundary. There is the C4, which is the zone to C3, but I think the planning commission should make a determination if that's the intent of that, being that it's commercial to a commercial. That adjacent piece was at one point C4, and it was rezoned for the car wash to C3 a few years back, which comes into question. And then on the other side is Macomb Township, which it's technically zoned C4, but their commercial districts are obviously different than ours, but it is a general commercial district. No outdoor advertising sign shall be located within 500 feet of a single-family residential district. Meets that requirement. No outdoor advertising sign shall block or restrict visibility of other uses or buildings, whether on-site or off-site. I'll leave that up to the planning commission to determine. Outdoor advertising signs shall be of a single or two-pole construction. All poles will be wrapped in brick, stone, or cultured stone to create the appearance of a stone build. If a single pole is used, it shall be located at the extreme end of the sign face, and the second stone build column will also be provided at the opposite end of the sign, so basically a dummy pole. The applicant is proposing a single pole in the center. Maximum height shall be 25 feet. The proposed sign is 60 feet tall. Maximum sign area shall not exceed 300 square feet. The proposed sign, I think, was 660 square feet. Sorry, that was item 7. Item 8, V-shaped billboard shall not exceed an angle of 30 degrees. I don't believe the angle was provided, but I do believe that that requirement is met. Outdoor advertising signs shall be constructed in such a manner that they will withstand wind forces of 90 miles per hour. I don't have that information either, but that's something that would be reviewed during permitting phase, as well as item 10, which refers to the illumination of the sign and the standards that are required for that. That would be required at that point as well. The exception to that is that it also states that electronic message signs shall not change messaging more often than once per 30 seconds. The applicant is proposing every 8 seconds. The area around and beneath the outdoor advertising sign shall be landscaped with a combination of low-height vegetation. This item, as the applicant addressed in their letter, is not provided, but as it's on township property, they said that that would be open for discussion and to resolve at a future date. So I went on to outline in the review, which I kind of just did, going through the requirements of the ordinance, what the variances are they are requesting. A couple of things to note. There was a reference to existing billboards in the township in the past practice of approving them. There's only two. There was, at the time of my letter and the time of the applicant's letter, there was 2 billboards on Gratiot that I tried to figure out how they and when they were approved. From aerial photos, it looks like they go as far back as the 60s, but at this point it's kind of irrelevant because they were taken down last week as there's construction going on that property now. So there's no longer there. The other 2 billboards are on 94 and do meet the requirements of the ordinance. Well, the one for the 2-pole construction, there is one with 1-pole construction. However, that was a consent judgment and prior to our current sign ordinance. Other than that, I would just state again, as you did with the previous application, there is 5 criteria that the Planning Commission needs to find in the affirmative for each individual variance. So you'll need to consider that when making your decision, and I can answer any questions.
Thank you. Applicant like to address the board? Yes.
Is there an opportunity to file information on the record prior to this going for a vote and or speak on the record? I don't see an area for public comment on agenda items. I'd like to speak and submit information to the record if possible.
Mr. Siebert?
You should allow public comment after the applicant's had his opportunity to make a presentation, and if a speaker wants to present information to the commission and the commission feels it's relevant, the commission can certainly accept it as part of the record.
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Sean Kelly, and I represent 2020 Outdoor Media, LLC. We did submit with our packet a rather lengthy variance request letter outlining all of the variance criteria we're requesting and the justification for those requests. I will stand on that letter unless and until the extent you have any questions.
There's a lot of variances you're asking for on this.
That's correct.
A lot. Like I say, when the first sign we had, electronic sign, came up years back, I was sitting up here, and I believe Mr. Gender and Alec represented the applicant, who I knew at the time, and that was over by Best Buy. So along 94, because we didn't have any billboards in Chesterfield, and that went on for a while, and then the one with Menards. You know, you're not near the freeway, and the size of the sign, everything is way over the variances. So I do have some major concerns.
If I may address.
Wait a minute, and I finished. You also want every 8 seconds. Ordinance is 30 seconds. Your 660 square foot, our ordinance is 300. 25 foot tall, our ordinance 60 foot. So pardon?
The ordinance is 25, their height is 60.
That's what I said, ordinance is 25, their height is 60, so that's a lot of changes. I've got to hear what other commissioners want on this.
Thank you. Mr. Brokart?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Mr. Renault?
In going through the appeals and variances requirements, I'm going through the 5 items here, and I have not been able to find a way to justify being able to say affirmatively that we meet all 5 of these, so I'm not necessarily sure I can get there. So, yeah, I'll wait to see if there's any questions that can bring that to light, but I don't see a way of doing this.
Thank you. Mr. Carr?
So just so I understand, so this is like a billboard that the owner will like sell for advertising?
That is correct.
So it's strictly revenue generation, right?
It is to an extent. There's also a number of nonprofits that my client supports through advertising on the sign, as well as providing free advertising to the township for community events and things like that.
Okay. Yeah, from my perspective, I did read the letter in advance, and I do find, typically when we do look at variances in general, they're easier to justify because typically they're within a certain percentage, give or take, of what our ordinance says. But because of the extreme requests of your variances, I thought it was a little over the top from my perspective, and the fact that it is a digital billboard, I think is in general very unattractive. That's why they typically go along the highway, not, that's where the 100 feet comes from. So reading your letter in detail prior to coming here, I mean, from my perspective, I didn't quite see how you justified any of it. I didn't see any rationale behind it. I didn't see any support behind it. So from my perspective, I think it's a difficult one for me to approve. But again, those are just my feedback, because mostly, like I said, you stated the variances, but you didn't really justify why. And typically for a variance, there has to be a reason of what's creating the variance. So that would be my biggest thing, is if I had the answer to the whys, then maybe I can consider it. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Jaworski?
Yeah, the amount of variances, that's just extreme, and just from, I've stood on this from our master plan, with things being harmonious with the area, I just can't see it working there. I just don't see any harmony, and especially when you're asking to grant so many variances, it's a hard one.
Thank you. Mr. Klinowski?
Yeah, I would say that we would have to rewrite our ordinance if we did pass this. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard?
Pretty much everything's been said that I was thinking. Thank you.
Mr. LaBelle?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask a question of the applicant, if you don't mind. Would you, when I consider a variance, I certainly consider everything that's going on, but could you recap the practical difficulties as to why we should grant this variance? And I know that you read it's a very nice letter. It was very well written, but would you please recap your difficulty as to why this thing needs to be, why you need to be granted all of these 5 variances?
First, I'll say that I appreciate the compliment. I did tend to droll on, but it was important to try to put down as much justification as we could. So for those of you who did make it all the way through my letter, thank you. It's a very unique parcel, as you all know. It's township-owned property. It's wedged between 2, what I would say are much larger buildings on either side, as well as set in front of the backdrop of a car dealership. My client's main concern is that he's trying to attract advertisers to pay money to place their ads on this sign, and without a sufficient size to delineate it from the backdrop of all that noise, advertisers are not going to be attracted to advertise on this sign. Unfortunately, these signs cost an enormous amount of money and upfront investment to build, with no guarantee that you're going to get any advertisers to come and actually pay for ad space. And so because, again, the parcel is so narrow, because there's these other businesses around, because it is set so much further back than the neighboring building to the, I believe it's the west, yeah, if I'm oriented right. That's mostly the issue. As far with size, if you're talking about it not being within 100 feet of the I-94 right-of-way, the township board has already approved a lease for an outdoor advertising sign to be placed on this property. So I'm not trying to like push the planning commission aside. Of course, I would never do that. I'm just saying that it appears at least that the board understands that what we want to put here, and they've agreed to allow my client to put here as an outdoor advertising sign on this property. With respect to the single pole and the single brick wrap, like the false pole, the 2 feet, again, it's a very narrow parcel. There's a number of easements that I've noticed from my review of the drawings and the surveys, to the point where I'm not even certain that it would be possible for us to have the 2 posts on that property and adhere to the setbacks and everything and not encroach upon the easements. And as far as the timing for the electronic advertisements, every 30 seconds as opposed to every 8 seconds, my client's not one of these larger national companies that has deep pockets. As I mentioned, he supports a lot of nonprofits as well as does a lot of free advertising for municipalities and other governmental organizations. And as a result, we have a lot of small businesses that advertise on these signs. 30-second and 60-second ads are just cost prohibitive for these smaller businesses. The shorter advertising time of 8 seconds makes it possible for all these small businesses, many of which are in the township, to be able to advertise on this sign. So again, there are a large number of reasons, of justifications undergirding why we're asking for these variances. And I understand the height and the actual face sign are probably your biggest hurdles. Again, it all goes back to whether or not it's cost prohibitive for my client and these advertisers. If it's a smaller sign, it's extremely difficult for my client to make any money. Advertisers don't want to advertise on it, and my client will have to charge more for those smaller advertisers to advertise on the sign as well. Now, it's my understanding that you can also approve lesser variances this evening, even if you don't accept our application outright as well. So I'd just like to make that apparent to the Planning Commission.
Mr. Renaud?
Actually, this is for Mr. Siebert. One of the requests is about the timing, and I'm not sure this body actually has the ability to approve that variance.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the first part of your...
I'm curious, I'm not sure, one of the variance requests was for the timing of the advertising. Instead of the 30, it's the 8
Right.
seconds, because the way I understood the ordinance was that as this body, we have the ability to approve variances to the dimensions and everything else, but I don't know if we can touch the ordinance for the timing. It seems to be, I would think they would fall under some other jurisdiction other than ours.
Well, I mean,
I'm not entirely certain.
the timing really is part and parcel though with the sign. I mean, whether it's the height of the sign, the size of the sign, the frequency of the message, you know, the ordinance is not clear, but I think I would include the timing of the sign in the message. I mean, you're not going to find that in here. I'm not going to be able to cite you to any law. But I think when you're looking at the ability of the applicant to ask for essentially a license to violate the ordinance, which is what a variance is, if they can satisfy the requirements of the ordinance, they've got to come up with a reason why they should not be held to the 30-second interval. And they've got to make a pitch that's going to satisfy you on all 5 of those criteria, why they have to do that. And as Jonathan said, I don't know how many, they need 8 variances, for instance. They're going to have to convince you on each of the 8 that all 5 of the criteria for all of the 8 are satisfied. And just one comment that Mr. Kelly made about the Township Board approving the lease, which they clearly did. This ordinance makes it clear that the decision on all signs in the township, including variances, rests with the Planning Commission exclusively. Your decision is final. There is no right of appeal to the Township Board. There's no right of appeal to the ZBA. There's nowhere else within the township to go once you make your decision. It lives and dies here. There may be other forums to go to, but it's not the board and it's not the ZBA. So this decision is yours.
Thank you for that, appreciate it.
Yep.
And for the record, I did read your letter as well.
Thank you.
Very well written.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may just add some additional context as well, that as part of the lease with the township, The consideration was some advertising spots for the township built into the lease, which equates to roughly $48,000 per year, I believe, in ad revenue to the township.
Thank you, Mr. Jaworski. Did you have another comment?
Well, thought there was someone from the audience that wanted
Oh, yeah.
to.
I have another question.
Okay, Mr. Carr.
So, back to what I said earlier. So, again, I read your letter, whether you, again, whether you think that some of us made it all the way through. I did, and again, once you started getting into your backup, none of it was an actual practical difficulty. Everything was mostly around, when you read it, was about the financial hardships of the owner, right? None of it was substantiable, right? I mean, even was be able to be substantiated, and in particular, what I thought was an interesting sentence that you made in here was, as mentioned immediately above, the requested variances are minor aesthetic and dimensional changes, and thus it is hard to imagine how relatively minor increases in height, face square footage, sign messaging duration, blah, 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 blah. In your professional opinion, would you think your variances are minor? And why would you, and I guess that's where you kind of lost me as a resident of this community and as a volunteer, as a commissioner on the board, when I read things like that, and I know you're just trying to sell it, but to me, it goes into the authenticity of what you're trying to write. I mean, those are not minor aesthetic changes. Those are substantial variances that you're asking us to consider. And so for me, that's why it's very difficult, because we didn't tell you to enter into a lease with the township. It could easily be within 100 feet of the freeway at any time. I mean, it's just, that's where you're trying to put it. And I think that most board members probably would be more open to it being closer to the highway, and maybe, I mean, I'm not saying I would approve it, but others might be open to it if it was more in that corridor. But for, I know for myself, it's just too big. And so for me, it's going to be a difficult challenge to convince me otherwise, because we don't get involved with the financial parts of it. We can only interpret our ordinances and the rules that we are required to abide by. And unfortunately, financial is not one of them for us. So that's my only comment.
Thank you. Anybody else? If not, I entertain a motion.
I'd like to respond just briefly to Commissioner Carr's comments as well, if I could, please.
Sure.
Thank you. So, with respect to the lease, I don't know, I guess you kind of lost me there. I don't understand. The lease with the township is for an outdoor advertising sign on this property, not any other property. So it's not within, this property is not within 100 feet of the I-94 right away. So I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm really not. I just didn't understand what you were saying, and I apologize.
I think if you came with a sign that was within our ordinances, I don't think most people would probably, I think it's the fact that it's the excessive, it's how excessive you're going beyond the ordinance, where I think most of us are having the trouble of trying to justify why so big and why such a large variance, because you have to understand that once we do that, now we set a precedence for every other future person that wants to be a small advertiser for digital advertising, and then they're gonna come and the first thing they're gonna do is point to the big one that we approved, and now we just open a huge can of worms for us on all future, right? And so we have to be very careful on what we can approve, and again, we have to have reasons why we're approving it. And again, and all I'm trying to say is, for me, it was just how much beyond the variance, behind the minimum requirements that you were going. I mean, for me, that's where I struggled with. I'm not saying I'm opposed to, digital signage going there. I mean, I would prefer by I-94, but because of the amount of variances you're asking for me, it's a very difficult fit in that location, is all I'm trying to say. That's all.
Okay, so I understand now. I think I understand. You're saying the township approved it for that location, but if the other variances were lesser, it'd be much easier to swallow, is what you're saying. Okay.
It's easier for us to then digest, because, again, whatever we decide here today, we are setting a precedence.
Yeah.
And some of the people that are in the audience that do come to regular meetings, we actually we get challenged and pushed back on that several times, like earlier where, you know, the R2, you were here for that, right? Almost every resident prior to this, when we've had the exact opposite, where we're going from an R to a C3, we had this room filled many times because they didn't want the C3, and now these residents are here not wanting the opposite, right? So we have to be very careful of the decisions we make because we set precedences. And that's all I was trying to say here is, for me, and I can only speak for myself, it was just the amount of variance you wanted from the variance. It wasn't so much the signage, and because at the end of the day, Hall Road it's a major corridor, right? I mean, it's like a freeway. I mean, everyone goes down there 60 miles an hour, so I just think it's the size. It's very big. That's all.
So as an attorney who's represented a couple different municipalities and sat with a planning commission when a room has been full before, I'm sympathetic, and as someone who actually sits on a commission in New Baltimore as well, I understand, I get it. I'd want to address my comments in my letter regarding the minor dimensional variances. I guess, and I don't want to be disingenuous here, but when we're talking about the size of billboards within the township and without the township along Hall Road, this is one of the proposed to be one of the smallest billboards that will be on Hall Road if it is approved. So I guess in the grand scheme of things, that's what I'm saying, as well as the number of criteria that are in the entire outdoor advertising sign ordinance. We're only asking for a few variances from those multiple criteria. And again, with the 100 feet of I-94, like that one's kind of a misnomer because the township has already approved the lease. As far as like the vegetation and things like that, we've already said that's not really a variance that we're asking for. It truly is something that's unique to the parcel and to the applicant when you're talking about whether or not it can be 1 or 2 columns, and as far as the amount of time for advertising space. It's simply impossible to afford the upfront capital cost to build this thing and then have 30-second advertisements on here. It just is. My client will not be able to build it. The township property right now sits vacant. Nothing's being done with it at all. I believe that's why the township board itself approved the lease and was eager to enter into the deal. As far as the number of variances requested, I mean, that's always an issue, right? I'm not aware of anything in the ordinance that says that just because there are 5 variances asked for, that by itself is a criteria by which you could deny a variance request or a number of variance requests.
Yeah, I don't think it was the number of variances, it was each variance, the magnitude of them, exactly. You can come up with 10 variances, it was just that part, but I understand.
And I think we had discussed it. I mean, it's really the two are the height and the overall size sign. And as I said before, I mean, that's something that is sort of unique to the parcel and to my client, is the fact that it's a smaller business. It's difficult to afford a smaller sign. Advertisers won't want to use it. And it really is because of the size, placement, and nature of this parcel. Is a smaller sign will get lost in the noise and the backdrop of all the other businesses there.
Anything else? If not, we'll let the residents speak. Whoever signed in, state your name for the record. Time limit is 3 minutes.
Okay. Good evening, Denise Bartholomew, real estate manager with Outfront Media, with address at 2310 Park Ave in Detroit. Outfront has a vested interest in this application and the associated variance requests, as we have an existing billboard 300 feet away from the proposed sign where 1,500-foot spacing is required. I've been doing billboard development for about 15 years, and these are by far the most outlandish variance requests I've ever seen. There are many, many great sites out there for a billboard. However, there's a reason why billboards are not on quite a few of those sites. They do not meet the regulations and they do not meet the standards for variances, which is the case here. Our industry is governed by rules and regulations designed to keep consistency and uniformity while not enabling excessive visual competition or other non-desired impacts on a community. The variances proposed for this site and for this project are not only unsubstantiated, they're in direct conflict with the purposes and intent of the ordinance, and if granted, it will hurt our business and the clients who rely on our signage to advertise, including many local small businesses and organizations. These aren't little tiny variances, as you've pointed out. They're requests that are over 100% larger with size and dimension, height, and unlike any other outdoor advertising sign in the township, excessively larger than both outdoor advertising signs and signage in general all throughout Chesterfield. We want to play by the same rules, and we have, as have other billboard operators in the township. And we ask that the applicant be held to the same standards based on facts. What was provided, I read just yesterday afternoon as I was just aware of it, so I apologize for not submitting anything in advance, but I certainly see that as creative writing for the sole purpose of increasing profitability, substantiating a need for the proposed sign and the requested variances is unlikely here. If approved based on the rationale that was provided, this opens up a huge can of worms for digital billboards to go on almost any property that's zoned correctly within the township, without regard for dimensional size requirements, location standards, spacing requirements, and others. And it certainly sets up the tone for additional litigation like the township has previously faced before over digital billboard signage. I can't imagine anyone wants that, and we certainly don't. I would ask that you review the additional details of the information that I'll submit this evening on the record before you take a vote, and if anything, table it until that information can be reviewed, as there are many additional facts that are not pointed out in the submission from the applicant that I believe are relevant to this decision. You asked for some of the other applications, pictures of what it's going to look like. That will be provided in your packet, as I don't believe it was provided by the applicant. And also, how small can it be to still make it work? That was a question proposed with another sign application, and I asked that question here. So I will leave it at that. I believe my 3 minutes is up. I would like to submit documentation for the record to be reviewed and respectfully request that it's reviewed before this goes for a vote. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Good evening again. Janice Young, 28714 Yorkshire. I didn't know I could actually speak on this tonight because I wasn't sure about the non-agenda thing. So I just wrote down some stuff as you guys were going along. I don't need to reiterate all of the variances, but point out a couple of things. But the applicant mentioned that they support nonprofits and everything. It also appears that they support politicians, because I do believe that there's been some contributions to our board members from some connection to outdoor media or the Orem family or something. So that's concerning to me. And the board did approve the lease. There was no public hearing on that. Just have to question the motives behind the board in doing that. And I am new to this game. I just took an interest in my community back in January, so I'm just learning a lot of things. But I've learned about a similar situation with the cell tower on Jefferson, where the board approved a lease, and then Planning Commission, I think, denied it, then the zoning board denied it, and then we got sued. Not quite sure really how that all shook down, but I see the cell towers there, so might indicate how that ended. Anyway, the supervisor sold it to the public as an opportunity for an affordable Welcome to Chesterfield sign. I don't know how a 60-foot billboard is a welcome to anything sign, to be honest with you. And some comments on social media where this is sort of reminiscent of the big golden ring in Sterling Heights. Has a cute little name, but I won't share that with you tonight. So I don't know that we really need to have this large sign as a welcome to Chesterfield. I don't think it's really what is good for our township. Let's see what else I have here. There was no other bids to companies. There's other billboard companies out there. And as far as the billboards being digital, I've drove 94 for years, and I'll tell you right now, those digital billboards are distracting when you're driving, and I don't care how often they change. They're bright, especially in the winter. Some of them I couldn't believe how distracting they were on 94. So that to me is a concern on Hall Road. At least on 94, you're all going the same way. On Hall Road, you have people pulling out everywhere. Oh, and message is changing every 8 seconds. We were sold also on that from the supervisor, that we'd get 8 seconds of advertising. Well, that to me indicates that he knew the applicant wanted to do 8-second turnaround time. I don't know how he would have picked 8 seconds out of 30 to do that. And there is no benefit to the general public on this sign. I can't see it. Even the landscaping issue, he said that he doesn't have any thoughts about landscaping. I took that to mean that he's going to leave it to the township because it's our property. We should landscape it. Maybe not. Let's see. Oh, and the last thing, I guess in general, I'm just kind of tired of seeing developers and companies in general coming into our community and using and abusing it until there's nothing left. I'd like to try and preserve some of the quality of life that brought me to Chesterfield in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
My name's Joe Kadich, live at 32825 Sutton in Chesterfield. I want to commend you guys for basically sticking to the ordinance and hopefully putting a stop to this. When it was brought up at the board meeting, it should have been brought up as a public meeting because it was involved a lease of township property. I brought that up at the meeting. Nobody paid attention to it. There was not a lot of information about it, other than the fact that most of the board members were for it. All this information about the size, everything else was not permitted at the meeting. You guys apparently pay attention to that. And I think the way it should have happened is they should have come to this board first when they proposed this. It comes through you for a variance and then gone to the board. Went the other way around. I think basically now it's up to you to say no, send it back to the board and let them make the effort, to push it through if they're so involved and want it so badly. Other thing I got to say about a big sign, if all you've got to do is drive down Hall Road and get to Utica, and you'll see the kind of sign that's there. Everybody's seen it. I don't know anybody that's in favor of it. The only thing that we've ever had like this before, it goes back a long way. I've lived in this township for about 50 years, was there used to be a drive-in movie on Hall Road in Gratiot. And I can remember going down there with my kids late at night, and because like the rest of the movie houses at that time, people weren't going to movies, they're going to the drive-ins, and pulling up to that light and being stalled at that light because they were showing porno movies. And I had my kids in that car, and nobody's moving through the light because everybody's looking at what's going on there. And you're going to have the same kind of thing here. It's not going to be as vulgar as that, but it's going to have the same effect. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
John Speaka, Chesterfield Township. I want to thank this board tonight for following the master plan. I'm going to disagree with the attorney for the petitioner. The township board, with the exception of Mr. Demink, because he wasn't present at the time, got it wrong. You guys are getting it right. What the petitioner is asking for, he's asking for multiple licenses to violate our variances here in Chesterfield. And as the board has said tonight, they're huge pills to swallow. They're not small variances, they're huge. For example, in the township, we allow 25 feet. He wants 60 feet. We allow, in our variance, it says 30 seconds. He wants 8 seconds. When you're driving down Hall Road with the type of bright lights and every 8 seconds, it's a huge distraction. On top of that, it is not the proper fit for this township to have that sign there. It's wrong. He knows it's wrong. Unfortunately, I mean, the board got it wrong. That's why you guys have an opportunity to get it right and set the record straight. On top of what the petitioner was asking for, he tries to throw in a caveat. We're giving the township 8 seconds for every 80 seconds equivalent. And I haven't been able to verify the math that he came up with, 2,000 per site, so $4,000, $48,000 a year. What he's not telling you is this. Yeah, the township is getting $48,000 per year. They're getting a 30-year lease with the opportunity to extend that lease another 20 years, which is 50 years. So let's relatively do the math. The township gets $48,000 a year. How many millions do they get? And on top of that, the township's losing. They're the ones that come out smelling like roses. So it's a lose-lose for the township. Then they don't even, when I was reading the agenda packet, they don't even want to put brick for aesthetics. We're going to be responsible for the upkeep. It is a lose-lose situation. And realistically, guys and gals, what do you think they're going to advertise on that sign? You know who wants that sign? I'm going to tell you who wants that sign. Cannabis wants that sign so that they can advertise. And it's just not going to be cannabis. There's going to be other advertisers. You're not going to be able to stop what goes on that sign. And that's not what Chesterfield needs, because we're better than that.
Time's up, Mr. Speaker.
No problem. Thank you.
Just a few last comments, if I may. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as some of the things that were said in comments this evening, we did cite a highway traffic study, a federal study released by the Department of Transportation that shows that there's really no appreciable difference in driver safety with electronic billboards versus any other normal type of billboard or other signage. As far as the comments about the 8 seconds and somehow the township was aware about that beforehand or anything like that, the 8 seconds was known to the township board because it was part of the lease. That was negotiated, of course, as a matter of course, in order to have the lease approved by the township board. There was nothing untoward there. It was simply a negotiation of consideration for being able to lease the property. As far as the township property and the issues with the landscaping, I'm not aware of anything that my client has represented that would say that we wouldn't take care of the landscaping, simply that the ordinance requires a sign owner to have a certain type of landscaping performed below the sign, and because this is in fact township property, we're simply looking to the township for direction on what they wanted us to do. It's one thing to be on a privately owned property and landscape according to the ordinance. It's another thing when you try to go ahead and do it on township property. As far as it being a lose-lose situation, I guess we don't see it like that. Although, of course, my client wants to make money by advertising, he also wants to help the township and the nonprofits that he's always helped. It's not $48,000 a year that the township is, the millions that my client is gaining potentially, which the numbers aside, again, advertisers and business people need to make money, okay? But it's $48,000 a year that my client is losing in order to give free advertising to the community. So I don't see it as a lose-lose. We see it as a win-win. And lastly, with the issues of cannabis, I understand and am sensitive to people who don't like marijuana. But it is legal, and it's legal to advertise it, and it's unconstitutional for a government to tell advertisers that they can't advertise marijuana. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. So our only alternative is to table this until they come up with another plan or deny?
Mr. Commissioner, I would actually point out that based on everything we've heard, and again, we have to satisfy all 5 criteria in section 52-11, that there is no way we can satisfy at a minimum number 2 and 5, which prohibits us from approving this as it's submitted. I just don't see how it's possible. So I would like to make a motion to deny sign review J23-2158 for failure to being able to satisfy all 5 conditions in 52-11.
I'll second that. Mr. Chair, I want to make sure that we have a good record. They have requested a number of variances. Some they may meet, some they may not meet. And it's incumbent on the commission to address each of the variances separately. You know, you've got the 5 criteria that are set forth in the ordinance, or 6 criteria that they have to satisfy with each. So I think to make sure that the record is clear, the commission should address variance number 1, height of the sign. I make a motion to deny that variance for the reason that they do not satisfy any of the 5 criteria. Done. Then go to the size of the sign. Go to each of the ones that are in there and address them separately. There may be one that they can meet, but they need to know when they walk out of here whether they failed on all of them or some of them.
Then I'll go ahead and modify my, thank you for that, Mr. Siebert.
Can we, I'm sorry, Mr. Can we take a break for a half an hour and give us an opportunity to correct? We need to make sure that this motion is correct.
Well, you can take a break.
Can we take a break for half an hour?
Hang on. You can take a break. You can go to the restroom. You can go outside, have a smoke. But what you cannot do is you cannot discuss this with one another. That's a violation of the Open Meetings Act. Any discussion that you have amongst any of you regarding this item has to be done in open session. So you want to take a break, get some air, that's fine. But that does not permit you to discuss this amongst yourselves. So make sure that you understand that if there's a break taken. It's not that hard. There's, Jonathan, how many variances are they asking for?
Mr.
5 variances.
Mr. Renault has it.
Okay.
He's got all the variances.
All right, so let's say they got 8 of them. You got to go through each one of them separately. Do they meet the height requirement variance? Yes or no? Do they meet those criteria? Yes or no? Go to the size requirement. Go to the frequency of the flipping of the sign. Go to the distance off of the freeway, the 100-foot rule. Go through each one of those, and if, for instance, they don't meet the requirement for the height, you simply indicate that I find that they do not satisfy any of the 5 criteria or 6 criteria for a variance for the height. Make a motion, done. And then do each one of those separately, and you'll have a perfect record.
Then,
Make a motion on each
Yep.
one, Mr. Siebert?
Yep.
Okay. Mr. Renault, if that's.
that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a motion to deny the first variance, which is requiring that the outdoor advertising sign be located within 100 feet of I-94. Again, we cannot satisfy all 52-11 requirements, so I would make a motion to deny it for those reasons.
I'll second the motion.
Motion by Mr. Renault, seconded by Mr. Brokart. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
I would also make a motion to deny variance number 2 request with regards to the 2 brick stone or cultured stone columns, as we have very specific requirements for that. And again, following the guidelines, we cannot have the affirmative to all 5, so I would make a motion to deny that variance.
I'll second again.
We have a motion by Mr. Renault, supported by Mr. Brokart. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
I would make a motion to deny the 3rd variance request, which is the maximum height. We have an ordinance that is to be no more than 25 feet. They are requesting 60 feet. And again, we cannot meet the requirements.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion by Mr. Renaud, supported by Mr. Burkhart. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
And I would also make a motion to deny the, I think it's the fifth, or the fourth variance here with regards to the going from every 8 seconds instead of every 30 seconds. Again, for the same reasons I've stated before, we cannot meet all the criteria in 52-11.
And I'll second that.
We have a motion by Mr. Renaud, supported by Mr. Burkhart. All in favor?
Thank you.
Motion
And-
passes.
And then lastly, I would like to also deny the variance request for the maximum square footage. We have an ordinance that says not to exceed 300 square feet, and the client is requesting 660 square feet. And again, we cannot meet all the requirements.
I second the motion.
We have a motion by Mr. Renaud, supported by Mr. Brokart.
Landscape.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
And lastly, I would throw out that I would actually put a motion forward to approve the last variance, which was the area with regards to the landscaping. Seeing as it's on township property, I can't see why that would be an issue of being able to grant that.
Okay. We're all set with that?
Yep. Unless you want to support that, once we can vote. Wait a second.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Mr. Renaud, supported by Mr. Brokart. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. The motion is denied. Number 7, comments from the floor is permitted by the commission on non-agenda items. Non-agenda related communications. Receive and file comments regarding agenda items. Number 10, committee reports, ordinance amendments, board liaison reports, reviews, and discussions from members of the commission, consultants, and township employees. Commissioner comments, Mr. Demink.
Thank you all the commissioners for the work tonight and for being here. Thank you.
Mr. Brokart,
I'm all set, thank you.
Mr. Renaud,
So I thank everyone for their time and comments. Appreciate it.
Mr. Carr. You good?
Well, I guess my only comments is, I think tonight, overall went as well as it can. Obviously I'm not as veterans like most of you guys are. I think this is my third board. And I've seen many things that I don't agree with that we do on the boards, and many things that I do agree with. But I thought overall tonight, I thought most, we did a pretty decent job in regards to trying to make consistency, because I think that's one thing that, in general, I think, I know myself as a citizen or a member of this community, and as a member of the board, I think it's important that we do try to maintain our consistency to the best of our ability, and understand that there's always exceptions to every rule, as long as we're taken under the proper, conditions. But I do think it is important to understand, when we're setting precedences and when we are not. And so I think I think everyone did a nice job tonight in regards to that. So that's all. Just thought overall, I thought it was good.
Thank you. Mr. Jaworski,
I have nothing this evening, thank you.
Mr. Klinowski,
I'm all set.
Mr. Leonard,
I'm good.
Mr. LaBelle.
I've got a couple of things. I'm looking for volunteers for pre-planning. Mr. Burkhart.
I'll do it. It's Thanksgiving week, so I won't be traveling. I'll do it.
You will?
I won't be traveling. It's Thanksgiving.
I have my hand up.
I only do it part though. We have too many.
Who's going to do it?
Who's going to do it?
I'll do it.
Mr. Burkhart?
All right, I'll let those two.
Mr. Leonard? The other thing I'd like to say is I had the opportunity, Mr. Klinowski and I both had the opportunity to attend a planning conference and I want to thank the township for allowing me to do that. I would encourage everybody to go to these if they can, if their schedules allow it. We learned a lot, we discussed a lot, and it definitely is worth your time. And again, I'd like to thank the township and thank Giffords Webster and everybody for what they did to make it as pleasant as can be.
I'll second that.
Thank you. I have nothing to say, so I will make a motion. Oh, planners report.
I won't keep you long. I would like to remind you all that this is, I don't know if maybe we didn't mention it before, but it's National Community Planning Month. So we are celebrating planners of all shapes and sizes, professional planners, practicing planners like yourselves. And I would like to thank you all for your service, for what you do for the community. Often it's a thankless job, so we would like to say thank you in case you haven't heard it lately. We do recognize your efforts to get training, to go to the conferences. You know, we had you this year. Several of you were in attendance last year. We find that your planning commission is very, takes this job seriously, this volunteer position seriously. You study your information ahead of time, and you make good decisions based on your ordinances and your plans. So thank you very much for your service, and that's all I have for you tonight.
Thank you.
Oh, and happy birthday to Mr. Leonard tomorrow.
You want us to sing, Carl? You want us to sing happy birthday to you?
We don't have 70 kids.
With that, I'll make
I'm turning 50 again.
I'll make a motion to adjourn at 9:02. Support. We have a motion by Mr. Miller, supported by Mr. Renault. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Did you